All right. So what I did here is I just created an empty React library, and I'm going to go into it. Most of the things that we do are based on a Python project at the root, and then they have a UI project underneath it. So but I'm not going to worry about the Python part right now. So normally what we'll do is we'll use this tool called create React app, and call it UI. Oh, and of course I need to install it because it's a new laptop. Oh, come on. Fine. So I didn't have the right permissions, so now I do.
When do you use the -G flag for npm?
That means to install a global tool, not to just try to install something into the local project directory. So normally if you do npm I, it'll just be it's kind of like doing a pip install into a virtual environment, if you're familiar with that. So now I can go back up and create React App UI. And so this is running some JavaScript stuff, installing a whole bunch of things, and making this ready to run, theoretically.
And the UI, that's not a flag, but what is that?
It's just the name of the project that I'm creating. And since this is underneath the, what do you call it, Arborian React project, it'll be, I just normally name them UI. It's probably a better practice to name them something meaningful. But as far as create React app is concerned, we're building a pure JavaScript thing, and we're telling it what the name of that pure JavaScript thing is. So I'll show the things that it creates in just a second. All right. Oh, come on. Did this get... This looks like it got more involved than it used to be. I guess I've never tried to start a project on the WSL2. Okay, cool. So now, oops, not there. Now I'll go into the UI directory. Actually, let me go into Vim here, so show you some of the things that are there. So when you create a project, you'll have this node modules thing. That's where it installs all of the JavaScript libraries that are going to be necessary to run your project. Got to admit, Damien again. It's also going to have a public folder. This is going to be just like static content for the website. So if you've got images or things like that. And I think inside this one, it's got a few different things just for the generic React project that we just created. Most of your work is going to be done in the SRC directory, and ideally in a subdirectory of that. So we're going to create a couple of different... Actually, I'll start off without creating subdirectories, and then we'll see if we can get to the point of moving things around. But just kind of the beginning point to index.js is going to be the entry point to the overall application. Actually, let me show you. Inside public, index.html is technically the entry point to the overall application. So this is a placeholder web page. And so if you wanted to change anything about the overall web app, you could change it here. Like there's a title right there. Right. And if you don't have JavaScript, you'll get this nice little thing saying you need JavaScript. And these things here are comments. We don't really do much with those. Some of these links you might want to customize. Okay, we got another Damien trying to join. Admit all. I wish that I could just have that turned off entirely. Different things like the icon is going to, and the fav icon, that's what would show up here in the upper left-hand corner of the tabs. Or if you pin something, it shows what the little icon is there. All right, so that's where everything happens. And the main thing, actually, we don't have a reference to index.js here. The React tools are going to inject a script tag. Hey, Damien made it in. Cool. But they're going to inject a script tag into this HTML, which is going to load our overall application. So we don't really have to worry about that. But if you did want to do things like include a snippet to make sure that you're accessing some third-party, tracking service, like I want to make sure that I'm tracking all my page loads in Mixpanel or something like that, or Google Analytics, you could put that snippet in here if you wanted to. Right. So let's see. The main entry point, though, that we're going to deal with is this index.html. And so that is, that's where we start doing our real, or sorry, index.js. That's where we start doing our real React. This one we don't normally modify very much. So you have to import React, and this is the way that you import in JavaScript. So this is what we call a default import. So JavaScript packages can have either like named imports, or they can have one which is registered as the default. And it's a little bit confusing. So if I come down here and I say import star as service worker, that's taking all of those things that are not named and importing them. And we'll look at some other examples a little bit later. But React, sometimes you'll see things like this: React, use callback, something like that. So we're both importing the default export of that module as well as one of the named ones. So we'll see that sort of thing sometimes. Right, so we need React and we need React DOM, because what we're going to do is we are going to render some React code into a particular place on our HTML. And so that's this document.getElementById. Going back here, ID equals root was right here. Right, so that's where it's actually doing that rendering, or doing that linking. Or that's how it gets linked, I should say. The actual stuff that we put in there is, I guess I haven't looked at what strict mode does. I think that might be new on this version of Create React App, but then it's rendering what we call a component here. This code right here with these tags that look like HTML, this is not regular JavaScript. This is what we call JSX. It's an extension syntax that React adds to regular JavaScript. So there's a lot to learn when you start out. I didn't realize that if you've not seen this stuff before. So these are not HTML nodes. These are references to what React calls components. And so they're little snippets of JavaScript that can be reused. And we got another game, maybe? Let's see. Anyway, so there's strict mode. That's probably doing something that I don't really completely understand, but the app is really what we're interested in. The app comes from this relative import, which says, give me the app from /app. So we'll look at that. This is the actual app. So the way that we do 99.9 or more % of our React programming is we use functions. We don't actually use classes very much at all inside JavaScript. So the way that this works is we've got this function, that's our component, and that function will return, usually it's going to return some JSX stuff, and that's what we're doing right here. It doesn't take any parameters because we didn't send anything into it. And then to make it the default export, we just say export default app. I could have also said export, whoops, I'm going to go into insert mode here, export function app. And if I had done that, then I could have in my, in here, I could have said import app like that. It's a little weird the way that that works, but that's the way that JavaScript imports and export work. You have the default one, and then you have others. And it's not always, it's kind of a stylistic thing, which way you go. I tend to keep things mostly not using the default, but yeah, that's the way that the Create React app gets us started. And then we return some pure HTML, right? So this is, it's still JSX code, but it is all of the, basically JSX supports all of the regular HTML tags. So when we return this, all this stuff gets substituted in for the page. And there's a couple of places which are kind of interesting. One is this logo. It'll actually be able to make a reference to that particular SVG logo, which that's a scalable vector graphic, just an image file. And this is part of the JSX extension to our syntax, which is to say that we can put in placeholders. So we don't have to do pure HTML. This is not valid HTML right here. But that curly braces means that we're going to substitute the value of the logo that we imported from here. I don't think we have got any others there. That's all just, that's pure HTML. Any questions about kind of the template that is created for us? Makes sense. All right, one other thing to look at that it's done is it's created this package.json file. Okay. Package.json is kind of like our requirements.txt and our setup.py and our setup.cfg in a Python project. So it represents a few different things. One, it has the name and the version number. It has various information about which browsers it's going to support. It has a few scripts. And so if you say npm run start, then it will run this particular command, React script start. So those things we'll use a little bit later. But the thing that's, I guess, the more interesting for us is the list of dependencies. So it tells us which dependencies are required. By default, it just gives us, it gives us some testing stuff. I don't know how to do testing in JavaScript yet, so we won't be doing that. And then React DOM, which is the connection between React and the DOM is the document object model. That's the React to HTML connection there. And then React scripts is where all these little command lines come from.
Sorry, can you say that again, what the React DOM was?
React DOM is the package that connects React itself to actually the HTML. So the only place that we use it is in app.py, not py, JS. No, I'm sorry, in index.js, where we render some JSX code. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. We render the JSX code into document.get element by ID. That's our connection to the HTML page. And it's saying basically replace that element with this React stuff. That's all really that we're going to do with React DOM, but it's the only way that React gets to talk to the HTML. All right, so that's the beginning. There's a lot to kind of go over. Actually, let me So npm start, try that again. So it's always going to try to start up on port 3000, and it will open up your default browser here and gives you this wonderful page. It is our welcome to React. So now we might want to actually do.
Can you show us the page source for that, the HTML?
Yes, thanks. Oh, I can do. But there's the command to do that. So what it's done is it's this was the original HTML. It did do a little bit of substitution. There was a little bit of substitution in the template, but this is where the magic is happening, is this bundle.js, chunk.js, there's another chunk.js. So these things are all built by this little test server, and they actually have to compile the React code with all the JSX stuff into kind of browser-independent JavaScript. So that happens automatically for us. We don't have to worry about that most of the time. And so that's how that ends up getting stuck in. Right? So that's our basic thing right there. I'm going to install a couple of extra packages here. So let me do a. That was the wrong way too. Okay, there we go. Little vertical split there. So I am going to actually go to the UI package, npm I, material UI core, so that we get something that looks a little bit nicer. So material UI is the UI toolkit that we use for all of our client code. And so if you want a popular React UI framework, I love the way that they describe that. So we can come down to the components here to get examples of some of the different components that are available. And what I'm going to do is everybody seems to do to-do lists, so why not do a to-do list? Okay, so it's been installed here. So I'm going to, actually, if I want to go ahead and make another directory here, and I'll call this, how about example? There we go. And call this the, so I want to, let's go ahead and try just doing this. Okay, import React. You always have to import React even if you're not using it in order to get the JSX stuff to work. So, so there's my import React. And here I'll say export function list page. And I'll return. I usually like to kind of do that as a boilerplate here. So so we'll do that. That's pretty simple. So I'm going to change my app.js, and I'm going to say import list page from example. See if that causes an error. It might cause an error, right? Because it can't find example. Because the way that this is set up, it doesn't allow you to start your imports there. And I've got to remember what file is necessary to make that work. So one moment while I look that up. Let's go. UI for Alfred knows. I think it's maybe JS config. Yep, that's it. So we want to include SRC. That's the magic that makes that happen. So I think I have copied that appropriately. Oh, what was it called again? Called jsconfig.json inside the UI. I needed more than that because it doesn't give me a template. Okay. I think I've got to actually restart this manually because it won't pick it up otherwise. Sometimes you have to restart it, sometimes it's automatic. Post on the old one. Okay, looks like that worked. And what that allows us to do is, rather than doing what we did here inside, let's see, index.js, see how we did this relative import right here from /app? That's kind of a pain. I don't like doing those relative imports. So we're going to do absolute imports from example. And that way you could put things into example or lib or whatever at the top level, and you don't have to worry about, if I happen to move this file, do all of my relative imports change? Anyway, so we've imported it there. And then I'm going to go ahead and clear all this junk out. And I'm going to say this page. And there we go. We've got a list page running. So let's make that a little bit more interesting. Oops, not by going there. There we go. So one of the things that we might want to do is give this a little bit of overall styling. So if we go to Material UI, I have this thing called, let's see if I find it, an app bar. I like to use the app bars here, something like that shows up along the top of your screen, right? So we usually have really nice examples. So I'm just going to copy their example right there. And see if I can paste it in. Yep, that seemed to kind of work. There we go, re-indent and something. Oh, well, yeah, I need to put it actually. You can actually put it in here. Actually, rather than putting it in there, let me say export function. Put it in there. Okay. So some of this I'm going to clean up a little bit. So one of the things you'll want here is you need to say what you want from Material UI. So app bar, app button. I'm not going to use the typography because I don't like using that. I'd prefer to just say H6.
Or I think is misspelled. Yep, capital A-P.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you not like the typography?
Because I like to stay on regular HTML if possible. So one of the things that you can do is you can style this. I don't know where this is, but it just says news. Okay. You can style all of your HTML tags in kind of a cool way. I'll show that in just a sec. We also need, I guess we'll need a button. We won't do anything with this button. Oh yeah, we will do styling here. So this is going to give me some errors. Errors are good. Okay, so we don't have classes. So that's the first thing. To do our styling, I guess one of the things make this fit. Come on. There we go. What you want to do is a make styles. And make, sorry?
Button has a capital U.
Oh, okay.
If you look, John, if you look down into the lower left corner there, it shows that error. So you can work your way through those.
Also over here. Yeah, so one of the things that I didn't do is create a theme. I'm going to see if I can do this without creating a theme, because that's, see if we can just do this. So make styles normally takes the, well, let's just see if it works like this. This is usually the boilerplate that I use here. So this is a little bit of extra syntax that's going on. Actually, let me show what that is equivalent to, because this is weird syntax coming from Python. So what we can do is we can say function make some styles. I'll call it that, and that takes a theme, and it returns an object, which is just like a Python dictionary. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say new button. What was the style that he wanted to use there? And this source code. Oh, just a margin right. Okay. All right, so it's just giving me that one little item there. So what make styles does is it takes that function. So if I want to be very explicit about everything that's going on, that's what's going on. And then here, if I want to actually use those classes, what I would do is I would say, sorry, this is actually use styles. So this is kind of a weird syntax in the way that we're doing things. This is what we call a hook inside React, and it's a function that kind of does something magical. So one of the things about the way that React is working is that this function is going to be called possibly many times to render this app bar. Anything that you want to be the same across renderings is going to have to be in a hook, basically. So the hooks provide you a way to have some consistency. And so one of the things that we want to be consistent here is our styles. This is just the way that Material UI does its theming. So and we look, I think we'll have time to look at the use state hook in a moment, because hopefully, oh, we need an new icon as well. I think that comes from, oh, it actually does come from, oh no, it comes from Material UI icons. Okay, so we need to import the icons as well.
Do you prefer using the functional components as opposed to the class components?
Yes, the functional components I think they're easier to understand, even though you got to learn about hooks. It takes a lot less code to do them, and I think it seems easier to me. I don't know, Dustin, you've been with it since I learned React. How do you feel about functional versus class-based components?
I think that they're both kind of similar as far as like learning them. I think that the code is easier to read with the functional components, but when you're Googling for documentation, I find that a lot of times you find the class components and examples, so you have to kind of translate it. So pros and cons of both.
Yeah.
So are most of our, I would assume then our applications are all written in a functional style.
That's right.
So we should continue that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it seems like newer documentation is using functional, like that. What is it? Material UI stuff is all functional, right?
Yeah. And functional, using the functions always has worked. It's always been an available thing. I guess that we have to actually say do this. You've always been able to use them. It just React hasn't always had hooks, and so there are some things you couldn't do with functional components up until hooks were added to React. And so that's basically when that was. Oh, what was it? Menu. Okay. This is kind of okay. That's right.
The hook that you have here, is that be considered, is that like your own custom hook, or is that something?
No, so I've created a
Side
hook.
that?
So make styles, you could think of make styles as being a hook factory to build this use styles hook. This is the pattern that I use in most places where I want to do any kind of customization of the styling.
But make styles is coming from Material UI as a hook.
Yeah, so you can provide your own theme. Whoops. Oh, because I capitalized it. Okay. So we got something there. We could make this so that it opens up and closes. And one other thing that they did, yeah, the title. All right. That should, oh, is it, did I not do a class? Is there a title on this anywhere? Oh, we put that on the H6, I see. All right. Okay. So we got this to work. One of the other things that we'll do here, I'll show this. If you want to style things, we can say things like that. I'll figure out what I did wrong there in just a second. Since we're doing styling now. Okay. So now that's got the same style as the as we were using before. And there's one other thing that was going on here with the style. What was the problem? Oh, I think I know. Maybe. So I'm just going to say that's the entire style for an H6 component. And it still is big. You can look at this and see why. Let me move this to the bottom. Okay. Why are you so small? Not the button. Yeah, I guess I can just do this. Maybe this is one reason why they do use the typography a lot. So this, by the way, this syntax right here, this is saying, this particular, any H6 that occurs underneath the root class is going to get these styles. And when I do something like this, I'm saying it's going to get all of the things in this dictionary plus whatever else I add here. and that's going to be margin. Actually, this is margin or padding. I think that's padding. So the padding top is 0. See if that fixes some of that. Nope, it must be margin. There we go. So then you can say margin top and margin bottom.
Why are the CSS classes camel cased?
Because normally you would say margin top. That's how you'd say it in CSS. And that would mean in JavaScript margin minus top.
That's
So
JS.
yeah, this is JavaScript code. So in order to make the CSS stuff work, we've got to switch it. That's the same reason also that we're using class name here instead of class. Class is a reserved word in JavaScript, so you can't use that word. But yeah, oops. There we go. Okay. So that fixes our bar right there.
So if you're doing margin top, you would normally have to say 0px or em or something like that, right?
If you were
So
doing,
it just,
yeah, if you're doing
yeah,
pure
normal.
CSS, that's true.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
what if you didn't want to use pixels as your measurement here? You just quote it?
I'm not sure. Probably you could do it as a quote. Let me see. 6. Yeah, it looks like that worked. I try to keep it with these pixels because they're device-independent pixels. It does some magic that I don't really understand because I'm not anywhere close to being a CSS expert. And it seems to work okay. And I actually try to stay away from any numbers here that are not 0. So if I want to do something that's based on the spacing, I usually do theme.spacing like that.
And where is that spacing set?
That spacing is set in the theme that was provided by Material UI. So actually, I'm looking at this. Why is that? Oh, it should be margin right. I didn't copy this properly. I was like, why is it just a number? Okay. So this makes sure that that menu button over here has enough space on the right. If we didn't have that, as we didn't just a second ago. Oh, sorry, that's the menu button is this button, isn't it? Yeah, that's the menu button. Then I guess if you got this really narrow, it might overlap or something. I don't know. But that's, and I guess they wanted it to be 2. So make sure that you've got some separation between the menu button and this news button right there. So that's that's the beginning of this. Let me go ahead and move this over, and I will say make a components directory here, and actually I'll not have that underneath example. And what I'll do here is I'll just copy everything from here to there and put it here in @bar. And I want to call this @bar here. And so in order to do that, I'm going to have to alias the one that I get from Material UI here as GUI @bar. And then when I come over here, I'll say, GUI @bar. And GUI @bar. And then I'll look at the classes that I actually have defined here. I don't really need this. I'm not using that anymore. And I'm using the menu button in the title, so I'll leave those alone. So that created a new component. Over here in my list page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I usually try to do these in kind of the big libraries at the top and then our local libraries at the bottom. So I'll say import @bar from components @bar. And we no longer need, oops, what did I do? I don't even know what that was. so we don't need these. We don't need, actually we do need some styles, so we'll leave those alone because we're still doing something for the root. And we don't need to call it my app bar, we'll call it app bar. And let's get rid of that hey there Arborian type thing. What we will do is we'll say, give it a title. Okay, there. And so we don't need any of those imports. So I'll just put that back up on one line. Don't need that guy. And so we can clean that up a bit. So that's a little bit better. Switch back over here. Now to get data from one component to another, that's the next thing that we've got to kind of do here, because I said I wanted to take this title and I want to make that part of the parameters of this app bar. So the way that we do that is through something called props. And props are just parameters to the component. So one way that we can do this is we can say props right there. And rather than saying title here or news here, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, I want props.title. Right? And boom, I just got something that changed it. So that's progress. I'll do one more thing here. Well, I won't get to building a to-do list today in the time that we've got, but I did want to do one other thing, and that is doing a little bit of state. So I'm going to do this state hook. And what I'd like to be able to do is set a title. And so I'm going to do a couple of things here. One is I'm going to have a text field right there. And that comes from Material UI. And so I'm going to say text field value is title and unchange equals handle change. I'm not going to do anything else to custom. Actually, we'll do one more thing, and that's I'll make it a full width. That's right. All right. So to get the actual values of the title, well, to get the title, one of the things I need to do is this use state. So state is a variable that stays the same across multiple callings of this function. So it's like you can set it in one render and it'll still be valid later on. That kind of makes sense. It's the way that the state works. So the way that we actually specify that is we say title, set title is use state, and you get to give it a default value here, which is going to be a there. Okay. And then here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this. I'm going to substitute that in there. It's also going to be substituted in this text field. And there's one other thing, and that's a handle change. And I'll just let me introduce a new function call syntax. So we can say handle change is a function which takes some arguments and it runs what I'm about to do here. So this is a shorthand for defining a function without having its name. So here we created this function with the name make some styles, but we could have actually used the same syntax, and that's what most of our code does, is it uses the syntax to create something just right in line. In Python, we call it a lambda.
Hey, can we pause right there for a second?
Mm-hmm.
So I just, before you go too far, is the state. All right, every time you change something in the React, it renders.
Yes.
So when you say you want state, I don't know if you had an input field and somebody was typing in it, you would want, like, let's say your title to not change. That's what you would put in state.
Well,
right?
State is something that will change occasionally, but you want it to remember that. So if I call this this function right here, list page, I'll get the same result if I call it one time or 1,000 times. That's kind of the normal way that you're doing this in React.
The state will change, but you want to control the way it changes.
Right, yeah. So if I call the set title function, then that
Mhm.
changes the value of the state, but that's the only way that the state changes. That's the only way
Right.
that it'll
Otherwise,
really
it stays the same. So anything
Right.
like you want to control how it looks, you would put it in state.
Yeah, so if I said something like let title equals hey there, and then I did some other update, some function which updates the title, every time it calls this function, it's going to reinitialize title to hey there.
And you don't want
If I
that.
do it right, if I did a regular variable, that's what would happen. With state, it uses the value that was set last time. So this kind of lives outside of this function. There's something that some magic that React is doing to maintain the values of all the states, and so that's why we're using the hook here. So I don't remember what the arguments are here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to console.log them. And we'll just see what those are when we actually get the change call. So let's see what happens here. Looks like that's going to work. Okay, so we got a hey there. Let's bring the console up. And I will say space. Okay, when I hit space, it sent in, looks like just one single argument. So that's usually going to be an event. And I think that's the way that, you could have figured this out by going to the documentation as well. Just look up text field and go down there, and you can find that all in the material documentation. Sometimes I find it quicker to just do a console.log and use the debug tools. So if you have a single argument, that was the wrong thing to do. Okay, got it. This has got to undo. Okay. There we go. I usually call it EV for event, and you can leave off the parens if there's just one argument. So I'll just do that right there. And what I want to do is I want to call set title on ev.target, and that's the thing that triggered this event, .value. So as you change the text field, then the value is going to temporarily change. And then this is responsible for setting the value in the state. All right? So that. And I have magic happening. So as I change things here, they change in the title. Right, so every key press results in a change to the state. Does that make sense? What's going on there? So I can type things in here. And then if I wanted to actually change this and print out something, so I could say console.log handle change, and I'll go title is going to become ev.edit. So change that. It refreshes my whole page, and so we say this is some text, and you can see it's actually doing that one for every keystroke.
So what's reaching back to the prop is that EV variable. Handle change equals EV. That's what's going back.
So
reading the prop.
Well, so it's pulling it off of the event right here. So the event is being generated by the text field, and so you can get the value of the text field off of that EV right there. So probably don't want to do it like this. So what we could do is we could say, maybe I could have something like another component here, which would be the text component, and it would have a value and a set value. This is another way that we can specify things. If you have an object like props that has two properties in it, you can just extract those out directly. You don't have to call it props like I was doing before. So anyway, we're going to pass a value and a set value. Actually, usually call it onChange. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this text bar or text field, put it there, and I'll just return that text field here. Okay. I'm not sure if I can do that. We'll see if that works. This handle change is actually going to come up here because we're going to make sure to onChange is now just going to send in the actual new value. So what we can do down here is we can say X component, and I'll do this for a moment. Let me not do this with value first. All right, so this should have the same, and I made a mistake because why? Oh, I know. I forgot to do this. So this disgusting error usually means that you're trying to put in something that is supposed to be an HTML component or a React component or something like that, and you're putting in something else. What was happening here is I was calling onChange instead of handle change, and it was trying to render the event object into the title of my page. That was the source of this error right there. So I'm going to save this, not like that, like that. And that's going to fix it. And now this works. And then one other thing. Let's not do this for the title. We'll call this the and I'll just make this an empty string. I'm going to have the title here. I'll just say and we'll see if I can actually just do this. Use our same little list right there, or sorry, same little use state. And I'm going to do a button. And then here I'm going to do a little, let's see if I can do this, items.map. This calls a function for every item in this list of items. So I'll call it it is going to be an li with it in it. And React likes these to have keys. All right. And I need to have an add item. So, sorry, const add item. That takes no arguments. And what it's going to do is it's going to say set items to be the old value of items. So that's ... items and whatever the value is. That's a way that you can append one item onto the items list. And then it's going to set value to an empty string. Okay, so I made a few different changes there. We'll see if it actually works. Oh, it won't work because I need a button. So let's try not to make it fail for silly reasons. Okay. My item. My other item. So now I'm actually able to add items to that list. There's probably a lot more that could be done to clean it up, but I said I'd stop at 2. Any questions about what I went through there and the things that kind of getting to the point of having components and buttons and events and things like that? I know I added a lot when I made it actually able to append to the list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you go back to the state? So we have the state and then the handler. So
Talking about it in the text component here or down here?
we used it twice. Okay.
So
the
each
items, set items, that's the actual state.
Yeah, that's another piece of state. So every time you call use state, you get a new variable that will persist across the calls to render this component.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got now two different pieces of state: the current value, which is part of this text component, and then the items list, the to-do items.
And where's your handler? Did you combine that all at once?
What handler?
I thought you had a handler in there to handle the
Well,
state.
I put a handle change. So for the on change on the text field, that's what I'm doing up here in this text component.
All right. That state stuff always just confuses me. So that's why I wanted to go back. But
yeah, think of it almost as it's almost like a database that you can, every time you get called, it has the value, it has the last value that was set, it has the last items that was set. And if you want to change it, you can call set items or set value again, and then that'll be remembered next time it renders the component.
Right.
And the rules, I guess, for rendering the component is anytime the props change, it's going to re-render it. Anytime the state changes, it's going to re-render it. So those are the two things. There may be other times that it gets re-rendered. I'm a little fuzzy on some of that, but this is the, that's the basics of it. It's not a to-do app yet because I can't check things off, but.
Is there a way to force a component to re-render when nothing changed, like from another component?
I am not sure if there is. I don't know why you would do that exactly, but I mean, you can have a spurious property that changes. If anything in props changes, then it causes it to re-render. And then let me show one other thing, because this is almost close to what we would write in like real code, but we would never, or at least in the code that we have currently, we never do this for the make styles. So what I do there is I actually combine this and say theme becomes, and then this is the shorthand for return this object. So when you see that open paren, open curly brace, return this object from this function. And so if I fix all my indentation, this is actually calling a function and passing it another function as its argument. It's the style builder right there. So this is what you'd actually see in reality. And I think you can also pass just regular, you don't have to pass a function here. I think you can just pass the object itself, but I tend to pass the function. And I made a mistake because I
think you just have or need an extra
I need,
print.
yep. No, that's, but, oh yeah, close parens, not close. There we go. Okay, so some things to And to make this nicer, you probably put it into a form so that the enter key would automatically submit it, and you do a handle submit instead of doing, having a button there. But for now, that's what we had time for.
Cool.
So let me go ahead and see if I can actually get ignore. For node projects. Does it have node modules? Yeah, it does. Okay. So I'm going to copy this in so that I don't check in any of the crap that comes along with all of this. And I'm going to put that into my UI directory as a .getignore. Oh, come on. Okay. That did not work. Okay. And there we go. Okay, why not? Oh, because I'm in the UI directory. Okay. Does it already have one? Okay. Okay, fine. I don't need it. That's actually pretty good. Okay. And let's go ahead and put this up on Arborian.
I'm going to go ahead and drop off. I need to get some lunch.
Alrighty. So thanks for coming. If you got other topics that you'd be interested in seeing, I can do them as live coding. I could prepare something. Just think about what would be the most useful for you. And I'll go ahead and quit recording it too. If you're interested in looking back over it, I'll let you know. Actually, am I recording? I should. Yeah. I'm recording.
I'd like to dive deeper into some of these React concepts. This was, a quick overview, but it'd be nice to see like in depth about state or whatever, how the re-rendering works and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was thinking we could take this example and flesh it out a little bit more, maybe next week, if that works.